I wanted to share this story with someone. I really can't find a reasonable explanation for what happened that night. It was just a strange and alarming experience. This all happened a few months ago. My friend had heard that the northern lights might be visible in our area and asked if I wanted to go for a drive out into the country to see if we could catch a glimpse. So we headed out after dark and drove for a while, putting the city behind us and winding out into the countryside, all while scanning the skies and just searching for a good vantage point where the stars and the lights might be visible. But several hours passed, and with nothing to show for our efforts, we started to give up on seeing the lights altogether. As we discussed what to do next at that point, my friend noted that we were close to her hometown and reminded me that she had been wanting to visit the local cemetery to find the graves of some of her distant relatives. She had recently been researching her genealogy. It was a clear, warm night, and we were both pretty disappointed that we hadn't seen the lights. We both wanted to make the trip worthwhile, so we agreed to swing by the cemetery. We pulled into the dirt road adjacent to the cemetery and walked around until we found the right graves. She took some photos, and we decided to just wander around for a little while. My friend was leading the way, using the flashlight on her phone to light the path and to ensure that we didn't accidentally step on any of the graves. I had been feeling increasingly anxious since we arrived, which struck me as just a bit odd. I've done several cemetery seriation projects as an archaeologist and don't normally feel nervous in cemeteries, even at night. In fact, I usually find that cemeteries are pretty peaceful and calming. But I felt really strange in that particular graveyard and found myself frequently spinning around because I felt like someone was standing behind me. Still, I just chalked it up to general anxiety and tried not to dwell on it. One of the problems with having an anxiety disorder is that it's sometimes hard to tell when your nervousness is justified. Even in retrospect, I don't know if my anxiety was just in my head or if it was related to what would happen next. After wandering for a while, we realized that it was approaching 1 a.m. and that we should probably get back home. We turned back and headed toward the car. My friend's car was in sight, and she was a few yards ahead of me when it happened. I suddenly got a wave of that nervous feeling again and thought that I heard someone running up behind me. I was starting to turn my head to look back when I felt something collide with my back, the initial impact hitting me right between my shoulder blades. There was a substantial weight behind it, as if someone had actually hurtled into me. The impact was so forceful that I was thrown forward and fell flat on my face. And as I scrambled to get back up, I felt the weight pressing into my shoulders again and was shoved back down. I then glanced up to see my friend running toward me. She had also heard someone running up to us, had heard my initial fall, and had turned just in time to see me being pushed back down. She would later tell me that she had seen my sweatshirt flattening against my back and shifting, as if someone had been pressing their hands against my shoulders. She grabbed my arm to pull me up, just as the weight disappeared, and we both bolted to the car, jumping in and instinctively locking the doors. She wasted no time starting the engine, and then hastily peeled out of the driveway. As soon as we hit the main road, we just sped away from there as quickly as possible. We drove for several minutes without saying a word. I think we were both stunned, and more than anything, confused. She finally glanced at me and said, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't quite know how to answer that. I told her that someone had shoved me to the ground, and she said, "I know, I saw, but what was that?" There was nothing there. We tried to come up with a rational explanation, but none of them made any sense. Had someone ambushed me and then bolted? Definitely not. We would have seen them. Had I tripped? No. I had definitely felt something pushing me, and my friend had seen me being shoved back down. Had it been the wind? Not possible. There hadn't been so much as a breeze that night, and if there had been some freak gust of wind, it would have hit my friend too. Perhaps an animal had attacked me, but that didn't seem possible either. There were no local animals large enough, strong enough, and stealthy enough to topple a full-grown human without being seen. I had been in full view of my friend, illuminated by her flashlight, during the second fall, and the weight had remained at my shoulders even as she was coming right up to me. She should have been able to see whatever had been pushing me, if nothing else. An animal would have cast visible shadows beneath the glare of her flashlight, but there was nothing. We just couldn't explain it. Whatever had pushed me, twice, it hadn't been visible to us. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed something else. My back hurt. Right between my shoulder blades, right where I had felt the impact. I could feel a sort of stinging, prickly sensation. It felt like my back, despite being covered by my sweatshirt, had somehow been brushed with stinging nettles. I mentioned this to my friend, and she insisted on pulling over to the side of the road to look at my back. She switched the hood light on in the car and pulled the collar of my hoodie down to look. I heard her mutter. She took a photo of my back and showed it to me. The skin between my shoulder blades was reddened, and several little blisters had started to appear. In the days that followed, the blisters would later swell up and pop. It was as if I had somehow gotten a sunburn or a bad chemical burn. There weren't any scratches or cuts. There were no open wounds, no blood. It was a relatively subtle mark, but it was still clearly there. And it baffled us. We certainly couldn't figure out how I'd gotten burned. I hadn't rubbed up against anything. I hadn't touched my back. I'd been wearing my hoodie all night, and there were no tears or marks in the fabric. And the burn hurt. It continued to sting for several days. You can see the photo here. I couldn't sleep that night. My back hurt, and every time I started to drift off, I'd suddenly begin to fear that someone was standing over my shoulder, and I would startle awake. I couldn't really understand what had happened at the cemetery, but it truly rattled me. I don't exactly know where I stand on the issue of paranormal phenomena, to be honest. As an anthropologist, I'm trained to keep an open mind, but I still have to rely on a deeply academic and often empirical perspective. Still, I know that something truly bizarre and frightening happened that night, and my inability to explain it, to account for every strange little detail, has been deeply disturbing. It's also been especially difficult to grapple with this, because I already have PTSD from a previous assault, and there is something profoundly unsettling about the fact that in this instance, there is nothing I could have done to defend myself, and with no clear explanation for it, there is no way for me to prevent something like this from happening again. I cannot cope with a fear that I cannot even begin to understand. It's also begun to affect my dreams. I've had several odd nightmares since the incident in the cemetery. Dreams that are oddly similar to the nightmares that I'd had for years when I was growing up. I don't know where they came from, but for as long as I can remember, I've had dreams in which a creature is attempting to lure me in one way or another, and in the dreams, I usually understand this creature to be a devil or a demon. Simply put, sometimes evil. Something dangerous and, like the entity in the graveyard, difficult to understand. These dreams have become suddenly relevant again, as I seem to have them nearly every time I fall asleep these days. I know that, likely due to trauma, hopefully not due to anything more sinister, these dreams and the experience in the graveyard are somehow linked. Sometimes, the menacing creature in my dreams takes the form of an old woman. I had one dream when I was about 13 years old, in which I was wandering through a forest. I came across a little cottage with an old woman standing by the porch. She beckoned me inside, and I acquiesced. We spent some time casually talking and baking cookies, but I felt uneasy around her, and got the sense that she wanted something from me. We stayed only in the kitchen throughout the dream, but I can recall glancing at the doorways to other rooms and seeing nothing but shadowy edges. I thought that perhaps I should try to leave, but couldn't remember how to find my way out. At one point, as we sat at the kitchen table, I glanced out the window and noticed a group of people standing in the yard, calling out to the old woman. I asked who these people were, and she told me, "They want me to take them in, but I don't want them. I want you, want you." In other dreams, it has had a more sinister appearance, but I always recognize it as the same creature. I sometimes have dreams in which it is sitting in the dark at my bedside, whispering to me. It has a shadowy appearance, with long, lanky limbs, and empty eye sockets. Its teeth are made of razor wire, and there is something like blood or wine gleaming on its lips, like this. In those dreams, I can hear it whispering, but can't understand what it's saying. Sometimes I have dreams of the same creature sitting in a chair in the corner of my room, eating what seems to be a rotten apple. I have long suspected that this creature is some manifestation of my deepest and most troubling fears. I know these are just dreams, but I mention it because those dreams had subsided in my early 20s. But the incident at the cemetery rattled me so much that they've returned. It seems to have shaken my understanding of the world around me, opening the floodgates to my own inner demons. In these new dreams, that creature is standing upright behind me at the cemetery. Time seems to be slowing down. I can sense my friend frozen ahead of me, and the creature is whispering at my back. I don't really know why my mind is conflating that dream creature with my encounter at the cemetery, but the fear has increasingly kept me up at night. I have no idea what happened that night. My friend believes it was a ghost, but I just don't know. I've just never personally experienced anything like this. I really don't know what to do with it. I had always believed in paranormal activity, to some extent growing up with ghosts and demons, but I never believed in curses. I always thought you had to be dead to deal with the supernatural. I was abused regularly as a child, and I remember always wanting to know when it would happen next. But I never told anyone, mostly because I thought they would kill me and wanted to know before. On this particular night, I was locked in the garage. I was so tired since I had to stay up for days, but I was without food, so I did my normal routine and snuck out to find food. I often ate bugs. I know, judge me all you want, but they kept me from being hungry. When I went to pick up this specific bug to eat, it bit me instead, so I let it go and went back inside, as I'd already eaten a bit, and luckily found a sandwich that was trashed. When I got back in, I remember being instantly tired and lying down on the ground falling asleep. I was no more than 6, but I remember this vividly. I had woken up but couldn't move, and a voice spoke to me. It was a simple question. "Do you want help?" I wasn't sure what it meant and couldn't move, but the thing approached me. Instead, it stood over me and asked again. It asked if I was hungry and why I wasn't loved. I didn't know I stayed in this dreamlike state for a while, as the creature asked me questions. After a while, I felt myself waking up, and it asked me again if I wanted help. It asked me if I wanted to prevent it, so I said yes. When I fully woke up, I was starving, which was odd. After a while, I thought I had dreamt it, and when I checked my hand for a bug bite, I didn't have one, so I assumed I had dreamt it up and never actually ate last night. A couple of days went by before I was locked without food again and went to eat bugs, dig through the trash, etc. After I ate a certain bug, I knew something was wrong. It just didn't taste good, and it had a ton of liquid in it. I ignored it until I finished my dinner and went back inside. Then I lived my normal life. Suddenly, when things happened, I had déjà vu. I didn't know what it was at the time, but as time flew by, I discovered it, and I'd always think of that dream I had. The abuse never stopped though, not until many years later. There were times I should have died, but I got by just fine. I didn't have to eat bugs much longer, though I was eating leftover food, or my siblings snuck me food. Fast forward, I recently got in a car crash, and right before, for whatever reason, I leaned to the other side of the car and got a huge sense of déjà vu. I knew exactly how it went, and I word for word remembered everything the doctor said to me, the car that hit us and the food I got after. In the short while I was unconscious, that same figure visited me. He said the deal was made and left. If I hadn't moved, I would have been blinded by the glass, and my leg would have gotten jammed by the car. Ever since that, I haven't had any déjà vu, and feel like a piece of me is missing. Honestly, I'm not sure what the figure got out of it, but I'm sure that was what saved me. I've wanted to find it again, but I'm sure it wouldn't have left if it hadn't gotten what it wanted. I've tried looking into it, but I keep getting that it was just a dream and you had a lucky break, or thank God, but I feel it was something more. This happened at the very end of 6th grade, on the last day of school before summer break. I only lived 5 minutes from the school, and since I knew the neighborhood really well, I decided to take a shortcut home, something I'd done before. But this time, I chose a different route through a part of the neighborhood I'd never actually walked through. It was a quiet street, kind of off to the side, and it had this weird, abandoned feel to it. Some of the houses looked empty, like no one had lived in them for a while. There weren't any people around. The whole street just gave me weird vibes, but I figured I'd be fine. Again, I was close to home. As I was walking on the sidewalk, past these empty houses, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road up ahead. The driver's side door was wide open. I couldn't tell if someone was in it at first, and honestly, I didn't want to find out. I don't like being approached by strangers, especially adults, when I'm alone. So I did what most people probably would. I pulled out my phone and pretended to be on it, so I wouldn't have to engage with anyone. But as I got closer to the car, I heard a man's voice say, "Excuse me, excuse me." I glanced over, and that's when my heart dropped. There was a man sitting in the driver's seat. He looked just like my substitute teacher I'd had that year. Same build, same face, even the same missing tooth. But his eyes were pitch black. I'm not exaggerating. There was no white, no visible iris, just full-on, pure black eyes. And somehow, they looked natural, like that's how his eyes were supposed to be. It didn't look like contacts or anything fake. It was just wrong. The moment our eyes met, I froze. I didn't say a single word. I just turned and sprinted home as fast as I could. I didn't even look back. I still remember the way my body felt. My stomach dropped and my chest got tight, like something was seriously, seriously wrong. The weirdest part is that I had just learned about black-eyed children and black-eyed people not long before this happened. I didn't even fully believe in them yet. So, to have something like this happen, right after I learned about them, it really messed with me. I'm 19 now, and I still think about it often. People say black-eyed people come back to visit you. I've been scared of that for years. I don't know if what I saw was really one of them, or something else, but I know it wasn't normal. And I know it wasn't my teacher. It just looked exactly like him. I've never told many people about this because it sounds so unreal, but I swear on everything it happened. In 2008, I was a sophomore in high school. The first day of school, I was sitting in my English class when this kid, whom I had never seen before, entered the class 10 minutes late. For privacy reasons, let's call him Mike. The teacher asked why he was late, and Mike responded with, "Sorry, teacher. I spilled strawberry daiquiri all over my shirt and had to change it." Mike was a class clown who was more trouble than funny. He was the type of guy who believed he could do whatever he wanted, and there would be no repercussions. For example, one day in English, the teacher was late getting to class. Well, Mike said that since the teacher was 10 minutes late, we were allowed to leave, and he did so. Later, he was shocked when he ended up in detention after school for skipping class. Mike and his friends were the group that would sit in the parking lot at lunch and rev the engines of their Subarus and act like they were in Tokyo Drift. I remember that Mike played football that year and was livid that the coach didn't make him the starting quarterback, despite him not being an all that impressive athlete. However, the thing that I remember the most about Mike was that he always wore this white baseball cap backwards and turned to the side, which was the style at the time. The next year, my junior year, Mike never showed up to school. Word was that he had been drinking with a group of friends near a fishing spot by the local river when he disappeared. The rumors also started. One was that he got into a fight with another guy who hit him in the head with a beer bottle. According to the rumor, Mike fell into the river and was swept away. Other people said it was his brother who had pushed him into the river. One guy in particular claimed that he had hit Mike and pushed him into the river. Regardless of the truth, Mike was never found. He had a full-page memorial in the yearbook. After that year, nobody ever mentioned Mike again. As time went by, the only time he would be mentioned was when some friends and I would meet up, and somebody would say, "Who was that kid who disappeared?" And the story would be told. Almost 15 years after Mike went missing, I met a guy who was a retired detective for the sheriff's department. Let's call him Jim. Well, it turns out Jim was the one who investigated Mike's disappearance. When I mentioned the rumors about him getting hit with a beer bottle, he said, "Yeah, we heard those rumors, but they never panned out." Jim told me that the day Mike went missing, he was out by that fishing spot with anywhere between 5 to 10 other teenagers. Mike had paid a homeless guy to buy beer from the local store so he and his friends could party. Afterwards, they drove way out to the fishing spot, 30 to 40 miles out of town. Jim said that more than likely Mike was drunk and fell into the river and was swept away. They never found the body, which Jim said was probably in the Gulf of Mexico by now. Jim asked what kind of student Mike was in school. I told Jim that I thought Mike was an entitled class clown. Jim was not surprised. Everybody else told him what a great student he was, which he said isn't surprising with missing persons cases. Jim said nobody wants to be the person who speaks poorly of the guy. Jim said that he got the same feeling about Mike's parents. Dad came across as a bully who peaked in school, and Mom was the homecoming queen. Sort of a deal. People who never moved on past that point. People who may have encouraged Mike's behavior by telling him about all the fun they had in their high school days. A year or so later, I was out fishing by that spot. I'd gotten there late in the afternoon, and by the time I was ready to leave, the sun had already gone down behind the hills. It was light enough you could still see, but dark enough to need your headlights when driving. As I walked back to my truck, I noticed that I was the only one in the parking area. I put my fishing gear in the bed and climbed into the driver's seat. As I backed my truck up, the headlights illuminated a cluster of trees in front of me. That's when I saw the white hat against the dark backdrop of the woods. Thinking somebody may have just left a lost hat hanging in the trees, which is common practice for lost gear, I flipped on my high beams to see if anything else was in the trees. When I did, standing in the trees was a person I recognized but couldn't place. The figure was wearing the white hat and staring at me. After a few seconds of staring at him, trying to place where I knew this guy, it clicked. It was Mike. He looked exactly the same as he did that day. He claimed to have spilled his cocktail on his shirt. Almost immediately I realized who I was looking at. Mike turned and walked into the forest. I put my truck in gear and noped out of there as fast as I could. I haven't been back to that fishing spot since, and definitely don't plan on going back after sundown. I asked a couple of guys I know who fish out there if they ever saw anything strange. Nobody ever had. I don't know if I saw Mike because I knew him, or if there was another reason. Firstly, I don't want to convince anyone that I really have this skill. My objective is to report and answer questions from people who are really interested and curious about the subject. In parapsychology, telepathy is the ability to acquire information about another person's thoughts, feelings, or activities without using verbal, body, sign, or written language. I discovered this skill when I was 7 years old, when I went to try a cinnamon candy with a friend. We bought it at the supermarket, and we each ate one. I loved the taste, but I heard my friend say, "Wow, it's really bad." So I replied, "No, it's really good." He looked at me scared and said, "How do you know I didn't like it?" I didn't say that. I just thought it. At the time, I didn't understand, and he, somewhat intrigued, spat out the candy and went home. After that, I noticed that when talking to friends, I would hear a voice coming from them when they were about to say something. I always spoke before they spoke, and they were surprised, but soon they started to treat me badly. They called me boring and weird, and stopped talking to me. To continue having friends, I stopped sharing what I heard, and didn't talk about it with anyone anymore. As a teenager, I managed to meet and have relationships with many girls. My friends, who didn't know, didn't understand how I managed to date so many girls. I jokingly said, "When you know what the other person is thinking, it's easy." They always laughed. The voice I hear doesn't always have the same voice as the person. Sometimes it's just the person's intention or feeling at that moment. But sometimes it's the same as the person's voice. It depends on how they represent their conscious thoughts. During my life, I told a few people about this ability, and when I did, I had to prove it by talking about something she was thinking. Even then, the vast majority didn't believe it and thought it was some mentalism or magic trick. As an adult, I decided to use this skill to help people. I chose to be a psychologist. Obviously, I do very well during the sessions, and my patients praise my work a lot, as I know exactly what they are feeling and thinking. Please show your support by subscribe to our YouTube channel and like the video. This really helps us a lot. I upload daily horror stories, so make sure to press the bell icon